Hi everyone, it's AJ with your Something to Do Saturday, and I have got something to do today because it is Valentine's Day time. So we're going to do a dinner for two. But you could make it for more than two, just up the ingredients on it, super simple. And I actually have 3 options for your dinner for two. So if you don't, I don't like stir fry, that's okay because I got some other options down here. So the one thing I am super excited about, if you've seen me do a video before, you know how I like those really inexpensive cuts of meat. Super excited, got this with the discount coupon, yay, less than $2. I'm going to show you how to take this cheap piece of meat and marinate it so that it doesn't taste like a cheap piece of meat, right? Because, you know, I like cheap. The only thing I like better than cheap is free. So I guess the word would be economical, right? But in my house it's cheap, okay? So today we're going to, in our dinner for two of your 3 options, we're going to do either a Chinese stir fry, kind of a traditional sort of beef tip pepper steak kind of thing, and then this really cool one, we are going to make some fajitas that are marinated in Coca-Cola, because I might like Coca-Cola just a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut my meat into strips, and then depending on which direction you want to take, I'll tell you what you're going to marinate. And of course then I'm going to give you some other options as to how to put this all together and make it a fabulous little dinner for two, dinner for the family, or dinner for Valentine's Day, yay! So let's cut up some meat. There's a lot of different things out there about, you know, how to cut your meat, with the grain, against the grain, do this, do that, take your knife and cut your meat. The one thing that I will tell you is depending on which meal that you're going to make, is how you will cut your meat, and basically it's a preference. But with my stir fry, I've actually cut them into cubes. I want just some, you know, little bite-sized kind of pieces. And for my pepper steak and my fajitas, I've cut them into long strips. Crock pot liners, they're super wonderful. Love these things. They're wonderful because not only can you put them in your slow cooker and take them out and you don't have to clean up, but obviously you can marinate in them as well. And I love that. So I lined my bowl, got my crock pot liner already in here. So this is for my stir fry. Now, this is an interesting thing. Just learned this recently, kind of excited about it, done it a couple times, absolutely love it because, you know, I love that economical or cheap piece of meat. So if you've ever been into a Chinese restaurant and wondered how they get their cuts of meat and their stir fry so tender, baking soda, who knew? It's a process called velveting, and you take about 3/4 of a teaspoon for each 8 ounces of meat, and you just sprinkle that over top. And what's wonderful about this particular one is that if you are using a velveting process where you're just going to coat the meat with baking soda, you can let it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then it is ready to go. It will have done its job. The bicarbonate that's in there, we're getting all sciencey now, actually breaks down the fibers in the meat, and it will be ready to go in about 30 minutes. The reason that I like to marinate it is the one drawback to your more inexpensive cuts of meat is that right out of the gate they're not as beefy tasting, and that's a lot of times why they end up in stir fries or in a stroganoff, because you got some saucy going on with it, so you don't realize that there's not as much beef flavor there. But that's why we marinate, because we're going to put some flavor into it. So I've got this baking soda in here. Before I do anything else, as I crinkle this bag all up, I'm just going to go ahead and close this up real quick and just give this a shake around. You could do this in a regular, I got a regular Ziploc, you could do this in a regular Ziploc bag and let it sit in the fridge, and that's super fine as well. But I like this because I'm actually going to put these into my crock pot, my slow cooker, and that is the way that I like to cook my cheap cuts of meat, simply because the slower you cook it, the more tender it becomes. The quicker that you have to do it, the less tender your meat will be. So again, I just want to get this nice and coated with that baking soda. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of soy sauce to this. The soy sauce is going to be my marinade for this. Now, depending on what kind of stir fry you like, because there's lots of different kinds, you could do like a, you know, a teriyaki type of stir fry. You can add some teriyaki, make it sweeter. So we're just going to swoosh that all around in there. And then I will just take a fun little clip. You can take a clothespin, you can take a chip clip, you can take a rubber band. You close this bag up and you can leave it sit in the refrigerator for 24, even 48 hours. The biggest thing that you need to watch is if you're doing really cheap cuts of meat like I did, that they have the little sticker on them, keep an eye on your expiration date. So that's it. Again, this one could be ready to go in about 30 minutes. You could put that right into your wok and get it going. I'm going to let it sit overnight so that it gets that yummy little soy sauce flavor in there, gets some good flavor going, and I think I might have to put some garlic in there. I'm thinking garlic, thinking I just need some extra flavor in there, so I'm just going to put a spoonful of garlic in there. There we go, because everything's better with garlic, right? It's not butter, it's garlic. So that is our stir fry for our Chinese. Toss that garlic in there. Our next one is our pepper steak. Again, we're just going to do these nice little strips of steak that we'll put over, or in my case, next to the rice, because I don't like food touching food. Yeah, I'm weird. And if you remember, I talked just a minute ago about this does not have as much of a beefy flavor as your more expensive cuts of meat. And that's okay, because we can compensate for that. Our sauces will help kind of, you know, mask that. But one of the things that'll really bring out good beefy flavor in anything is Worcestershire sauce, however you say it. See this right here? This Worcestershire sauce. Whatever this is, put this in with your beef if you're going to make like a beef tips or pepper steak. But the other thing that we're going to put in here that I got to grab out of the refrigerator because I forgot is milk. So hold on, talk among yourselves just for a second. I'm going to grab my gallon of milk. There we go. Got my milk. So we are going to put milk in this one. We want to break down those fibers in our cheap or economical piece of meat. If I could open milk, that'd be great. But the lactose in the milk is actually what breaks the fibers down in this particular cut of meat. So we're going to just put a little milk in here. And pour some milk in there. There we go. Get that good and coated. And a little bit of the Worcester, I don't know. You know what it is. We're going to throw some of that in because that's going to give us some good flavor. Because I'm doing pepper steak, I'm going to put just a little bit of crushed red pepper in there. Okay? Just because I want that extra little, kick of flavor in there. Not a lot, just a little bit. Just so that you got some flavor. I'm going to put a little bit of salt in there because, again, that's going to help propel that breaking down of those meat fibers. And I feel like I just got to have some garlic in here because I like garlic. And garlic is good. So now we have our pepper steak. Same thing, we can just kind of swoosh this around, put a little chip clip or rubber band on there, and again, we're going to let it sit for 24 hours and we'll throw it into the crock pot and slow cook it. So my last one, see how handy this is? Clean bowl, and I'm ready to rock on number 3. Is our fabulous fajitas that we're going to make, kind of a Mexican style dinner. So I've got my lovely steak there. Again, a little bit of salt over top of that, just a tad bit. I'm going to give it just a little shot of the sauce. Again, that's going to help with that beefy flavor. You can also use, there's stuff called liquid smoke that can kind of enhance the beef flavor. I use it in my bean soup a lot. And then the not so secret ingredient, my personal favorite, the Coca-Cola. And we're going to pour that over top of it. And this is going to do two things. Is that one, again, the carbonation and the sugars in the Coca-Cola are going to help break down those meat fibers, and that syrupy stuff that's in there is going to penetrate that meat, so it's going to give it a really sweet taste to it. And the cool part about this one is when we actually pull this out of the refrigerator and put it into the crock pot, you don't even have to do anything except maybe add a little more Coca-Cola, because that is going to end up being kind of a sauce that coats this fajita. Really yummy, really delicious, because you can't go wrong with Coca-Cola, right? So already out of the gate with just simply cutting, throwing it in here, our meat is prepped. We're gonna let it sit for 24 hours. We're gonna pull it out, put it in our crock pot, and we're gonna cook it about you can cook it anywhere from 4 to 8 hours, depending. I will recommend that if you're really, particular or concerned about how pretty it's going to look on the table, if you're doing a dinner for two, you want a romantic dinner, you want to make sure it's looking pretty, keep an eye out so that you don't overcook it. Because when you overcook it, it starts to fall apart, and then you don't have those pretty little strips laying out. If you're doing a pepper steak, you got just kind of this hairy little meat going on. You don't want that. So we're going to pop these in the refrigerator and marinate them for 24 hours, and then we're going to put our whole meal together, which is super exciting. So go put your stuff in the refrigerator and come on back. And as long as we're letting things sit overnight, grab yourself a can of sweetened condensed milk, put it in your crock pot, fill up your crock pot with enough water to cover the can and a little extra, and let it sit for about 6 to 8 hours on low. Overnight's good, and you will have a delicious caramel sauce when you open up this can. Perfect for a quick and easy dessert that looks really fancy, and I'll show you how to do that. So get some sweetened condensed milk and get it cooking. While our meat is marinating, let's talk about what we're going to have with it, because that's important, right? That's what makes a meal, is how everything kind of comes together. Rice. You know I'm a fan of rice, and why am I a fan of rice? Because it's economical, cheap, and it's also very versatile. Did a whole thing on rice a while back with an At Home with AJ, if you didn't check that out, because number one, you should have a 50-pound bag of rice in your house right now, because it lasts forever. I do like the long grain slow cooked rice. Why? Because it's cheaper, and I'm cheap. It's definitely cheaper than the minute rice, and it lasts longer than the minute rice. But we are going to cook up 3 different types of rice. We're going to make a fried rice, Spanish or Mexican rice, and a beef rice. Let's cook some rice. So I sprayed my wok with some non-stick spray, and instead of oil, I'm just going to use a little margarine, because that'll give us a little extra flavor, and margarine is mostly oil anyway, so it's not going to hurt. And of course I have some garlic in there, because you know how I love my garlic, and I just want a little extra flavor in there, so that'll be good. And if you don't have a wok, you can use a regular frying pan. That's quite alright. I like it because it has the high sides. I have a tendency to make a mess anyway, so the high sides really help things out quite a bit. And I got this one at Walmart. It was under $10. I want to say it was like $6, and it's held up pretty well. My only complaint is that, I suppose I could. I don't put it in the dishwasher because of the wood handles. So anyway, when you're doing your rice, this is just regular white rice, long grain, slow cook white rice. Nothing fancy, dirt cheap stuff. And we're just going to kick this around in the margarine and the garlic for, just a couple minutes until it starts to get a little bit brown. And once it starts to get a little bit brown, we'll, do the big to-do where we pour in the liquid and it steams everywhere. But again, this helps the rice to keep its little individual graininess or its integrity so that it doesn't all lump together. Sometimes it still does, but this tends to help it out a little bit. And also, again, sitting it in the refrigerator and then reheating it, that will help. So again, this is great as a make-ahead kind of thing, and that's oftentimes why, we end up ordering out or, making bad choices, is because of the time it takes. Sometimes we just don't have the time, so cooking ahead and making a couple meals at a time can keep you out of the drive-through sometimes, which is always a good thing. So that's starting to get a little brown, and I'm starting to lose most of my liquid that I had. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pour. Now, because this is my fried rice, I'm going to use some chicken broth. This is our fried rice recipe, and there's that big steam. And long grain slow cooked rice is always 1 part rice to 2 parts liquid. I'm gonna bring it to a boil. I'm gonna boil all of that liquid out of there as much as possible. Actually, probably what I'll do is get it to a good rolling boil, and I have a nice big fat pot lid that I will put on this, but you don't necessarily have to steam this. You can just go ahead and cook it until the liquid boils out of it, either one. For the beef rice, you will do exactly this same process, but instead of pouring chicken broth in, you will pour your beef broth in. So while my rice is cooking, I cut up a whole stalk of celery, and when I say a whole stalk of celery, you're going to cut up the leaves and the whole bit right down to almost that yucky little white end. And I cut up some green onion, and again from the very bottom of the onion all the way up to that chive part. And now I'm just going to throw it in this pan, again with just a little bit of margarine. We're going to brown it up so that it's nice and tender. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of poultry seasoning in it, and the rest of my chicken broth, and we will have what they call spring onion soup. Now, I have seen recipes where they also put water chestnuts in that. That is totally up to you. I don't have any water chestnuts on hand, and I don't have any water chestnuts on hand because I don't like them. They're gross. But, you know, feel free, if you like water chestnuts, to go ahead and put them into your soup. And if you don't like them, then you'll have soup like mine. And basically, this is just kind of like a chicken noodle soup without any chicken and without any noodles. And it's super simple, but it kind of adds a little extra something to your dinner. I added my broth and my poultry seasoning, and I also added a little bit of vegetable flakes just because it was looking a little bland, a little slim, because I did reserve some of the onion for the salsa we're going to make to go with the fajitas, so I didn't want to use all of my green onion, so my soup was looking a little lame. And even though it's just kind of a little addition to the meal, I wanted it to be alright. So now that we have that all mixed together, I can just let that sit on warm until we're ready to eat. I have my cubes of meat that we marinated in our soy sauce and baking soda, and again, that baking soda is what will help break down the fibers in the meat, and that is referred to as velveting. So once you have your meat to half or about 3/4 of where you want it to be cooked to done to your liking, you can add your vegetables. So if you are using fresh vegetables when your meat is about halfway through cooking, you can add your fresh vegetables. If you are using frozen vegetables, you can cook your meat about 3/4 of the way to done and add your frozen vegetables, because your meat is going to continue to cook while your vegetables cook, and you don't want to overcook your meat. And then once your vegetables are tender and to your liking, you are ready to put your whole meal together, because next we're going to just fuss with our rice a little more. And I actually will put this on the back burner to keep warm because it's real close to being done. So I am going to just let it finish its last few minutes on low while we go ahead and assemble our fried rice, which is going to be super simple and easy. So I have put my meat and vegetables into my soup pan on the back burner to kind of finish up cooking and to stay warm. I have put my soup into bowls because I heated it up so that it will need to cool. So about the time that the rest of my food is done, my soup should be about eating temperature. And like I said, my stir fry is on the back burner, kind of finishing up there. So I'm just going to heat these peas and carrots a little bit, just to kind of, they were frozen. Again, if you use fresh, give it a few extra minutes, kind of time things accordingly, which isn't always easy. And I did throw a little garlic in here because, you know, I like my garlic. And then once I feel like these are probably about halfway cooked, I'm going to take my rice that I had in the fridge. And again, if this sits overnight, it'll have even a better texture. But really that pre-frying a little bit in the oil before you add your liquid really helps it to keep its individuality, I guess. Its integrity. It makes it keep those nice little individual grains. And so I'm just going to kick this around a little bit, get everything heated up. I don't need to do this a really long time because it's not going to take too long for those frozen vegetables to thaw out. And the rice is just, I'm going to add my egg because, you know, it's not fried rice if you don't have a little bit of egg in there. And because I don't trust myself when it comes to cracking eggs, I did that in a separate bowl. Throw my eggs in there. I'm going to pop those yolks right out of the gate. Get those scrambled up and moving. And that will be our little beef stir fry with fried rice and spring onion soup. And so there we have our first dish done and ready to go. That is our beef stir fry with fried rice and spring onion soup. So I have my rice that I have browned up in a little bit of oil and of course a little bit of garlic. Now with the Mexican rice they have two different options here. Either one is fine. You can use chicken broth or you can use beef broth. Remember it is 1 part rice, 2 parts liquid. So I am putting in my beef broth, but I've also accounted for the tomato sauce because this is going to be a tomato based rice, so I'm using some tomato sauce as my liquid. I'm also going to throw just a little bit of basil in here and a little bit of sugar. Anytime that you use a straight tomato base with no additive kind of thing, you'll want to put a little bit of sugar in there just to take away that bitterness that the acidity of the tomato will give on it. So I'm just gonna put those other couple ingredients in there. I'm going to bring this to a boil, and as soon as it boils I'll put the lid on it and let it simmer while we make salsa. So I cut up some of my green onions that I had, so I've got those in the bowl already. I took the tops of my peppers that I'm going to use for the pepper steak, so I just basically have kind of almost the leftovers. Don't ever throw your tops away because look at how much pepper you get out of that from just, you know, the tops. Don't throw the tops away. No waste, no waste, no waste. We're going to do a little bit of cilantro, and you can use fresh cilantro if it's available to you and it's economical. If not, the dried stuff works great. I like to have both. I dried today, so that's what we're going with. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are probably the hardest thing when they're not in season to get good ones that you know, taste good. So if you don't have it on hand, either because you didn't get to the grocery store or wasn't, you know, they weren't tasting good, maybe they're too expensive, diced tomatoes will work. And I'm actually not even going to drain these because you want that salsa to have a little bit of, like, I don't know, sauce, juice, whatever you want to call it. So I'm just going to dump the whole can of diced tomatoes in there. I'm going to do the same with the can of corn, and I'm not going to drain that as well. Just going to put regular can of corn. You can use frozen corn too. This was just smaller and more economical. And I have some black beans. Now, I will say that I use organic black beans. Not that I care whether or not they're organic. They seem to be less, I don't know of a better word, they seem to be less slimy. I do rinse them because they are kind of slimy to begin with, but particularly the organic seem to be a lot less slimy. They're prettier. I don't know what goes on. I don't want to know. So I'm going to put a can of the black beans in there. Of course, I'm going to put a little bit of garlic, or maybe a lot of garlic. Who knows? Whatever comes flopping out. That's how the salsa's going to be. That's going to be garlicky. Yum. And a little bit of sugar, because again, we've got that tomato base in there, so that we want to take a little bit of that bitterness away. And I'm going to throw some Italian dressing in here just to kind of add to the liquid content of it, and also because it has all the little spices in here. Now, if you didn't have Italian dressing or you didn't want to do that, you could certainly throw a little oil and vinegar in here with some, spices of your choice, some basil, oregano, whatever sounds good to you. And again, what is really nice about this, other than it's pretty, look how pretty it is and colorful, this actually is better the next day when it has time to set up and those vegetables can actually soak up all that liquid and just kind of marinate overnight. So when you're putting your meat together, if you want to go ahead and throw your salsa together at the same time, it's a good time to do that and just let it sit overnight. And then the next day you come out and you boom, 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 and you have this fabulous dinner and it's ready to go, and it looks like you didn't take into, I don't know what happened there. I guess I wasn't paying attention. So you've got this all mixed up. We're just going to let this sit for a few minutes. And of course, I highly recommend that you get a tortilla chip and taste it ahead of time. Does it have enough cilantro? Does it have enough garlic? Does it have enough sugar? People always ask me for the recipe for this outside of, the basic cans of stuff or the amount of stuff. Do you. If you like more peppers than you like onions, or, more beans or whatever. Everything in my house needs, more garlic. I don't know that there's too much garlic. So make sure that you do it according to what tastes good to you. Just kind of play with it a little bit at a time and add to it as you need to. So while I was cutting my vegetables for this, I also cut up my onions, which I have simmering on the stove. We're caramelizing those onions. I am ready to just kind of pull my beef out of the crock pot and put it together to make some delicious fajitas. So I think it's about time to eat. Yay. So here we have our Coca-Cola marinated beef strips and our caramelized onions that we're about to add to that. I will throw some sour cream on there, and we will have some delicious steak fajitas with some Mexican rice, and of course our yummy salsa. Yum, yum, yum. So before we throw the pepper steak together, we're going to whip up a little dessert, and it's kind of a modified magic pie recipe. I did pixie dust pie a while back, and this is the same kind of modified recipe. It's just eggs, milk, a little vanilla, a little brown sugar, and some margarine. We're going to blend it up in the blender and then bake it in the oven. And when it's done, we'll put some of that delicious caramel sauce over top of it if you boiled that sweetened condensed milk. And it'll make kind of almost like a flan type of dessert or a custardy type, yummy delicious. So I've got my peppers in here in the wok. Remember, I sliced those up when we made our salsa, so this was ready to go. And that kind of takes some of the prep time out of a meal if you do little bits and pieces for other meals at the same time. On the back burner, I don't think you can see it, but I have my French onion soup going. And again, when I did the onions for our fajitas, I went ahead and just cooked extra onions so that I had caramelized onions all ready to go. All I had to do was throw them in the beef broth, and my rice is also simmering here in the pot, and I browned my rice just like I did the other two, and then moved it into a pot and just threw beef broth and some vegetable flakes in there, so nothing fancy there. So to give it a good flavor and just make it kind of a nice meal is to not overcook your peppers, okay? When you put them in like a fajita, You'll want them to be soft and almost flimsy. But with the pepper steak, you want to leave a little bit of crispness or crunch to them. You know, if it were a pasta noodle, it'd be al dente, slightly chewy. So when you're cooking up your peppers for pepper steak, don't overcook them. And if you're fine, and throw my meat in here and whip up a little sauce, and dinner will be ready. So we've got our beef in there with a little bit of butter and a little bit of beef broth that I'm going to go ahead and throw in here. And then ideally, depending on what kind of flavor you want, you could throw a little cream in here. Again, if you have it on hand, a little whiskey or a little bourbon makes a lovely bourbon sauce. We'll save that for another time. So I'm just going to throw a little bit of milk in here and let this come to a boil. And once it comes to a boil a little bit with the milk, it'll start to thicken up and make kind of a sauce, and then we'll be ready to serve it up. And so there we have our delicious pepper steak with our yummy little cream sauce over top and our French onion soup. And normally I would go and grab a bag of that dollar bread from Walmart and toast it up to dip in the soup, but I actually had some leftover cheese bagels from JT, so I just sliced those up, shot some butter on them, and put them in the oven. So I'm not going to put any cheese over top of my French onion soup. Normally you take a piece of provolone cheese, lay it over top, and melt it either in the oven or the microwave. But since we have cheese bagels, it's going to be easier cleanup and probably a little tastier. Yum. So let's check on dessert. Our custard is baked, and you can invert it and pour your caramel sauce over top. Unfortunately, mine came out a little thick, so we're just going to spoon it on, and even though it's not pretty, it's going to be delicious. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, remember to like, comment, and share so that your friends can become our friends. And I hope that regardless of which meal you decide to do, that you get to share it with somebody special. And if you need some more ideas for Valentine's Day, check out last Saturday's video where we made this really cool edible candy bouquet. It's good for Valentine's Day or any special occasion, or just because. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will see you real soon.